Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Maurice Carter. I'm the president of Sustainable Newton. I'm joined here with fellow board member and secretary, Dr. Melissa Hage, assistant professor of environmental science at Oxford College of Emory University, and our special guest this evening, which is 2019 Oxford College and 2021 Emory University graduate, Rachel Musetti. I first met Rachel when she was a student at Oxford, and all of us attended the Climate Reality Leadership Corps training with Al Gore and 2,000 of our closest friends in Atlanta back in March of 2019. And we had plenty of time together in the car. We all carpooled back and forth to Atlanta, which, if you know Atlanta traffic, gives you plenty of time to get to know someone. And I was so impressed with Rachel's clarity of purpose in the things she was focused on in her life, her education, and her volunteer work. And I was impressed with her passion for climate action. And she's certainly carried that forward since that training. Some of you may remember Rachel also as a panelist in a virtual discussion we had last fall for the film, The Story of Plastic. I've enjoyed watching Rachel advance through her education to graduate from Emory this spring with an environmental science degree. And we're excited to have her join us this evening from Nashville, Tennessee, where she's just starting a year of service with AmeriCorps, working with Hands on Nashville, a recycling and zero waste as the recycling and zero waste education coordinator for Metro Nashville Waste Services. So she's going to do great things in the world. We're excited to spend a little time with her now. And I'm going to turn it over to Melissa and let her talk to Rachel about some of that.
Thank you, Maurice, and welcome, Rachel. It's nice to see you again. It's been a little while since you've been at Oxford, but it was always great having you in class. And like Maurice said, I was always very impressed with you in class and how articulate and passionate you were on such a wide range of environmental issues. And so it seems like you're moving forward with those, and it's great. So this is just to kind of get to give you a chance to tell your story about where you started and what opportunities you had and your path forward, and thinking about recommendations and ways other people can get involved with this. So I'm going to just start with kind of getting a little bit of your story of how and when did you get interested in sustainability, environmental science, climate action, this whole big genre of interest.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's such an honor, and it's great to see you both again, especially now that I moved out of Atlanta. Yeah, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. Pretty much my whole life was just being outside and enjoying nature. And my father was always like, oh, it's Saturday, it's time to go get the recyclables from the neighbors and the family and like take it to the dump in the recycling center. And that was just how I grew up. I grew up being told to like buy applesauce in a larger jar so you're not paying for the packaging, and having all that single-use plastic laying around the house. So it was really just a part of who I was growing up. And when I went to college, I didn't even consider studying environmental science. I was majoring in philosophy and Spanish at the time, and I ended up taking your intro to environmental science at Oxford, and just falling in love with how intersectional it was and how it wasn't like a hard science where I needed to know certain chemicals or anything. It was really how can we get people to build relationships that benefit people who are kind of not at the table quite yet, and how can we really amplify their voices. And that just really spoke to me as a way to make actual tangible difference for something that I grew up just loving. So I think 2 months into that class, I ended up contacting my advisor and changing my major and saying, I want to pursue this. I want to minor in it. I want to major it. This is what I'm going to end up doing for my life.
That's awesome. And I think that's a really common story. A lot of people don't think about environmental science and sustainability and climate as an actual career path. It's something that's not it's not a common science seen in high schools anymore, and so students aren't exposed to it, and it just kind of people have this passion when they're younger and sometimes lose it along the way because it's not getting fostered. So it's really great that you were able to reach back to some of those earlier interests that you had. So you already kind of touched a little bit on the second question I had, but was thinking about how not just your educational experiences, but also your volunteer activities, how has that helped shaped your interests and your ideas of how you want to move forward in this general field of climate, environmental science, sustainability.
Yeah, so at Oxford, for those who don't know, there's like a little nature trail there. And my first year of college, Hurricane Irma, I think, struck campus, and there was a lot of restoration efforts, and especially on the trails. And I just started doing that every week with Volunteer Oxford. And I met so many community members, and just hearing their stories and hearing them talk about like why they got into environmental science, and maybe it wasn't like their full-time job, but just being able to do restoration work and talk about like the stream banks and why these trees are more susceptible and things like that was just fascinating to me, because I never really put that together, even growing up like surrounded by trees, like why certain ones break so easily. So that was just absolutely fascinating to me, and I just continued volunteering with that. Like Mr. Carter talked about in the beginning, my sophomore year, spring break, I actually spent at the climate reality training. Decided not to go anywhere. I was like, this would be great to meet more people. And that connected me with clubs at Emory, connected me with different volunteer groups, helped me get my next job just through networking through that. So it was really amazing to just kind of be able to meet different people and understand their climate stories and kind of see where I could fit in on that path with them, or if I couldn't, just learn from their experiences as well. So I think the volunteering that I chose from that point forward was really something that I was interested in, whereas previous to that, I think I just kind of chose volunteering experiences and what was available. And I think through volunteering, especially with environmental projects, you're able to just meet so many amazing people that I'm just like obsessed with finding different like disaster relief, disaster response, sustainability workshops and whatnot. So I think that's been amazing. And putting those on like my LinkedIn and whatnot, being like, I was at that conference, or I did that when it was in Minneapolis. A girl I studied abroad with was like, oh, my mom's the director for the climate reality in Minnesota. And I was like, that's so funny, because I definitely was there when they were in Atlanta. So it's just really cool to just kind of put yourself out there and see there's so many people with the same experiences.
Yeah, a lot of these things you learn quickly that it's a small world. And there's you start going to a few things and you start seeing some people that you recognize, and it just kind of keeps snowballing from there, which is kind of great. And like you said, the networking led to actual more kind of tangible opportunities with job opportunities and things like that. I also know as a student, you were able to engage in some environmental research. Do you want to tell us about what you were doing with that project and what you found so interesting about that work that you were doing?
Yeah, so as a senior, I chose to do an environmental research project with Dr. John Wegner. So we were just Zooming every now and then throughout the pandemic, and I was talking to him about microplastics and just how prevalent they're becoming. And I think they had just published a report about finding them in freshwater streams in Kentucky. And we were talking about how we really only ever heard them in the ocean or in things like that. And then suddenly they were in freshwater streams and they were in breast milk and things like that. And it really got us thinking about Emory's waterways. So we decided to use clams, an invasive species of clams, Corbicula fluminea, or Asian clams. They're about the size of your thumbnail. And they're just hanging out in Lullwater Park, Lullwater Nature Preserve, and different streams on campus. And we would just go out with buckets, collect some clams, dissolve them in different chemical solutions, and look under the microscope to see if any plastic remains were left. And we ended up finding a lot of plastic particles in Emory's freshwater, which wasn't super surprising because it is urban streams, but it was quite disheartening. So just kind of be able to put that information out there, like Emory's on a nature preserve, and this is such a polluted nature preserve, that there were little pellets, there were little like plastic fibers, there were just multiple kinds of microplastics. So being able to identify that they're here, and then the next step, hopefully someone can say, how are they getting there? What can we do to stop them? How can we kind of alleviate this issue? So something that I loved that came from my research was that Dr. John Wegner was like, this is an easy research to do, and it's so eye-opening. We should make it a 232, which is ecology at Emory. or just ecology actually, but it's an Emory course. And we should make that a lab assignment. So students now are doing this every semester in that class to kind of look and see if the amount of microplastics are changing over the years, and just to get students to be able to see what microplastics look like, how prevalent they are, and what kind of research goes behind that, which to me was super eye-opening because I've only ever read about them, and actually seeing them and seeing the process of how they're absorbed through filter feeders. Like the reason the clam has had them was because they take in everything and they spit out the water. So they purify the water, which is great because they retain the microplastics, but you're able to see just how many there are. So I'm so excited that, freshmen and first years and sophomores are doing that at Emory right now.
That's amazing to be able to take that research and have it be in the classroom and have it continue and be able to keep monitoring that. Did it seem like the plastics were harming the clams in any way?
It didn't. A lot of clams, so it was hard to tell like how many were in the clams because we would gut them and dissolve them. But there were a lot of clams. We were taking like maybe 100 from the stream and you couldn't see a dent. They are invasive, so they survive very, very well in those streams. But it didn't seem like there was any issue in their growth pattern. They were everywhere.
Yeah. So it's just interesting, you had this interest as a child growing up, and you kind of stumbled into the field by taking a random class in college that was kind of interesting. And I always tell my students that's the point of a liberal arts education. You take a variety of classes that maybe sound interesting, and maybe you discover something that you didn't know you wanted to do, and you're able to move forward with that with more classes and research and volunteering. And now you're a big graduate of, college graduate, and you're continuing to move down this path. So what are you doing now that you've graduated? What's the next step? What are you thinking? Or what are you doing actually?
So I've known for a while that I wanted to go into nonprofit work, just because I love relationship building, and I really wanted a job that I could use my environmental science background, but I could also relate with people and do a lot of volunteer management. And that's where nonprofits really thrive, is just making those connections and maintaining them with people. So I decided to do a year of service with the AmeriCorps. So I'm currently in Nashville right now, working with the city government as the recycling and zero waste education coordinator, which is amazing. I'm getting to work on building curriculum for K-12 students to kind of talk about sustainable options and why that's important and why we should all be caring about it. But it's matching their curriculum standards. So it's easier for the teachers to kind of incorporate into it. And so it's a lesson plan for them that actually matches the state standards rather than, you should be teaching this, go do it. We're kind of taking away that step where they have to figure out what exactly to talk about and what kind of research they need. So we're working with them to be like, these are some great resources. These are some activities you can do for the younger kids. Let's do them. And I absolutely love it. We're also working on making different like fix-it series. So they're educational videos and resources on how to repair common objects instead of just buying new ones. Because I think it's so easy to just be like, oh, this chair broke, like, let me get a new one. But instead we're taking a step back and be like, wait, this is cheaper. This is more, environmentally ethical to do it this way. How about we can just like, put another screw in or something simple like that. So it's really about kind of making sustainable options more accessible and kind of getting rid of the word option or alternative and just making them sustainable choices, sustainable decisions that we make every day. So kind of taking out the step of you can do this and making it you should do this, and this is why it's easy and accessible, and we're here to help you. So it's really exciting to be here. Nashville just accepted its zero waste plan, so it's really a great time to be in recycling in Nashville right now.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. That sounds like such an important project to be involved in. And, as an educator myself, if someone came to me and said, hey, we think you should be teaching this, here's all the material, it makes it so much easier. Like you said, you're removing that roadblock and getting this information to younger generations as soon as possible and have it just become second nature. The goal, I imagine, is to raise a generation that is way more conscious than us old fogies here. And every generation becomes more and more enlightened and aware of these sustainability, like you said, choices. They're not, move away from alternative this and have it just be, this is the way we live and this is how we should be living. And that's such a great service that you get to provide to these educators.
Yeah, it definitely was my dream position. And
Yes.
the first, after our first interview, they were like, we want you, like, we can't imagine anyone more passionate about trash. And I was like, oh gosh, what does that say about me? But I was like, yeah, that's probably true. Like, I'm just so fascinated by waste.
Yeah. So, because there's so many different aspects of sustainability and environmental science, and they all play such important roles. And so, do you think staying in waste and waste management and education and recycling is something you want to keep doing, or are there other aspects that you're equally passionate about that you want to try pursuing, or do you have any thoughts on, after this year, where you may be heading or what you may be interested in tackling next?
Yeah, so at Emory, the job that I kind of talked about that I got through Climate Reality was at Emory's Office Sustainability Initiatives. So my bosses were actually there, and we didn't connect, but being able to talk about that in my interview and talk about what I learned and why I was passionate, they were like, we were there too. And it was really a great experience. So that was super awesome. And at OSI, I was the general sustainability intern. So I got to lead volunteer groups on waste, like the Zero Waste Ambassadors, to talk to alumni at homecoming or just parents and be like, this is our 5-bin recycling system. It may seem complicated, but here's why it's not, and here's why it's easy to make these decisions. And I just loved that. I loved being able to do that outreach. It's something that, to me, that I grew up doing, that I realized not everyone has done. So I moved to Nashville, and they were saying that recycling is once a month here, and you can only take like these 3 items. And I was like, it's fascinating to me that we don't have a streamlined recycling in the United States. And even within a state, it can be so different everywhere you go. So for me, I think there's so many different aspects of waste that I want to explore that I'll probably stay in it. But I loved working sustainable events and working with green buildings and LEED and site certification at Emory. I think that is so fascinating, to be able to say, like, this is, you should have your house facing this way because sunlight gets in and you're not paying as much for heating, and it's, helping the environment because you're not using all that natural gas or oil or whatever you're using to heat your home. So things like that are just like simple choices that you make when you build a house, and it's one and done. And I think that's so cool. There are definitely areas of sustainability that I've explored and I'm like, this is so cool. But I think for me, I'm admiring them from a distance for now. I think one of the trade-offs with AmeriCorps is they'll help pay for your next degree for up to 7 years. So I'm probably going to head to grad school sometime in the next 7 years, probably for natural resource management. So I can work more, choosing where sites like landfills and whatnot go, and hopefully they'll be in more ethical areas and areas that aren't destroying habitats or already overburdened communities. So kind of bringing a younger voice to the table and saying, hey, this is what we've noticed throughout history that you're doing, and this is why we should change it. So I think that is the path I would like to go on. But working in zero waste is just so fun. Nashville has all these festivals, and my boss was like, we need to create a sustainable event guideline for festivals. Go. And that to me is so exciting to be like, yes, you need a recycling bin for every trash bin, like easy choice, one and done. Even when there's not food, you need like a compost bin because people walk places. So just kind of making those decisions and making that checklist so people can just be like, got it, here's what I need to do, I can do this, instead of just telling people, you need to do this, figure it out. I've always been someone who loves to plan and loves organizing. So for me, being that middle person is just where I thrive and where I'm so excited to be. So I think this is probably an area I'll stay in for a while.
Yeah. And it's not, all of those ideas that you're just saying, not only for private events, but also thinking about at the government level, thinking about local city governments, and they need that guidance as well. And it'd be interesting to try to think about this material that you're creating for public and sharing it with whoever wants it, and have that, let's make our communities, let's think about what are the cities in, say, Newton County doing, and do they have this general policy of, let's have compost bins, let's have recycling bins, and how do we educate the community members about recycling and composting? And there's so much outreach that can be done at the community level as well. So I see you going on, and you're going to be, a city council member, mayor, and just go from city to city, greening it all up, which is great.
Yeah, it's definitely a funny position to be in, because my friends are like, we never really imagined you working in waste. And I'm like, me either. But my boss was like, we can see a landfill from our building, we can see water reclamation, and we can see a compost center. And I was like, this is my place. Like, I'm so excited for this, to be able to just kind of see it all at once. So it's kind of interesting to see like what makes you geek out in life, because I'm loving this, and this is never something I expected that I'd be doing.
Well, that's a great transition to the next question. Is there's gonna be a lot of different people listening to this and hearing what you have to say, and do you have any advice or recommendation for people of all ages in moving forward and thinking about how to get involved with sustainability and climate action, environmental science? What do you suggest? What do you recommend? Words of wisdom.
So something that I feel like my generation is especially, so they talk about this a lot, is that like 71% of our carbon emissions come from like 10 companies. And I think we should fully recognize this, but I think that's also not a way for us to say there's no need for me to be sustainable then, like my decisions don't matter. I'm in like a Facebook group called like Zero Waste, Zero Judgment. And if I have questions about like, hey, can like Tupperware go in the recycling? Like, people want to help all over the world. And just kind of being able to find that little outlet, even when I wasn't working in sustainability, there were so many people and so many resources online that can help you get there. And just volunteering and meeting people, like sustainable actions don't need to be a full-time job. They don't need to be something that you dedicate your entire life to. Like I am, because I'm geeking out about this and I love this, but it's not for everyone. And I fully recognize that. But kind of making those decisions to just, carry utensils so you don't have to use reusable or disposable utensils all the time. Like that's something so simple that like I do at work, and I used to do it like other places, and they were like, that's a really good idea. And I'm like, yeah, you should do it. Like you don't need to gatekeep sustainability, but you can always encourage it in your actions. And that's something that I'm a big proponent of, is that we can all do better. We can also all advocate and, write people in power to say like, you should be making cap and trade laws or whatever for these companies, but I still need to do my part. And I'm a big proponent of trying to get everyone to do their part as well. So I know that this is about my sustainable journey and like what I'm doing career-wise, but I don't think sustainability has to be a career. I think it can be a lifestyle. And I think kind of going in with that mindset that you can't do everything perfectly, and I'm not going to solve the recycling crisis, but I'm going to help people solve their own recycling crises. And that to me is important. So I think just having that mindset is that you can change your life, you can change other lives, you can't change all the lives. So it's really easy to get overwhelmed, but just kind of grounding yourself and making sustainable options, I think is a great decision, something that I hope a lot of people end up doing.
That's such a great message to get out there, because I think you're right. A lot of people feel so overwhelmed, and there's so much to be done, and there's so many bigger sources of these problems that people feel helpless. And what is my actions really going to do? And you worded it so eloquently that I won't try to restate it, because it was really, really well done. So as someone that's worked in this field and has thought about it for a while and is clearly passionate and informed, are you optimistic about our future when it comes to sustainability and climate action? And you see these problems and you're hands-on dealing with them. Are you optimistic? I
am optimistic. I feel like that's part of my personality, however. I feel like I read a lot of these reports and I understand that like afterwards I need like a mental break, because I know how overwhelming it can be. But I also know that I read so many articles like about different groups, like the Break Free from Plastic campaign, which is entirely like youth led throughout colleges, and how they're like Emory is committing to single-use ban and kind of reduction of plastic waste, and just how that was started by 2 people, and that was a huge movement at Emory. So just kind of stepping back and being like, there are amazing people all over the world doing amazing things, and we don't always hear about that. So I think I do have hope, and I am optimistic, but I would say cautiously optimistic, because I do also recognize that you don't have a lot of time, but every second counts and every decision counts. And I'm just someone who has faith in people. So, I definitely have my fingers crossed, but not giving up the fight, not relaxing or taking my foot off the gas.
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it, of cautiously optimistic, right? Because this is something that you're passionate about, and you're not going to force it down people's throats, but there's still things that you can do to make a difference, and you can impact other people and help them make differences, and all of those things add up, and they really do have a kind of combined effect for addressing a lot of the problems that we have. So that was a really great way of putting it. Maurice, do you have any questions? Any final?
I've kept myself hidden, because that way I can jump up and dance around the room and say yes without being on camera. I warned you folks that are listening up front about Rachel's clarity of purpose and passion for this, and I think that comes through very well. But I think what I take away from this, and I want everybody watching to also keep in mind, is all the people that Rachel mentioned who influenced her along the way, all the way back to volunteers on the trail and just people sharing their stories. And, I think, so those of us who've been around a while sometimes can start to feel like, we're kind of tired and we've done all we can do and we know it's not enough. And, I can speak for my generation and say in some ways we've let you down. But at the same time, it's not just seeing all the young people that Rachel just mentioned who are doing great things, but it's the fact that you have the opportunity every day to set somebody on a course to do great things. And we know that Rachel is one of those people that we're happy to have in the world. So, but we all play a part. Somewhere tomorrow, you'll encounter somebody who isn't quite sure yet where they're going to go, and you're going to be the difference. So that's kind of what we're about at Sustainable Newton. We started this thing as a grassroots movement because we said, we're not, like Rachel said, we're not, our nature is to be hopeful and to be, but, just sitting and twiddling our thumbs and being hopeful doesn't accomplish anything. So we brought the group together to try and support one another. And along the way, it's been wonderful to meet people like Rachel and to watch, what she's doing in the world. I look forward to a lifetime of doing that, and all the other young people that we've met through Oxford, through Georgia Tech, through our local schools. So Rachel, again, thanks so much. It's you're starting your second week in your assignment there, and I know you also had some weather move through as part of the remnants of the hurricane. You were able to join us tonight, and we greatly appreciate that. And Melissa, thanks so much for all the great questions. Any last words, Rachel, from you?
Just thank you so much. I mean, throughout my college career, Sustainable Newton has always been someplace that I can turn to. And it meant a lot kind of as I was figuring out my path. So thank you both for kind of helping guide me, because I really don't think I would have ended up as happy anywhere else. And I really think that sophomore year when I met both of you was pivotal for me. So thank you both so much.
Well, you're absolutely welcome, and we're so glad to have you as a friend. For those that happened upon this video and don't know who we are, it's sustainablenewton.org. You can follow us on Facebook, and we'll give you ways to get involved, but we'll also help you keep up with the great things that Rachel and some of her classmates are doing in the world. So thanks for joining us, and to both of you, have a good night. Thanks so much.